Okay. If we gave you this problem, we said, can you tell me what the answer to this is? How would you do it? Make it what, Leonie? X squared plus 2 squared? Unfortunately, that will not be correct. Good guess, good try. Because when something is squared, that means what? Multiplied by itself, Jamie. Good. So that means x plus 2 times x plus 2. Remember from last class? How do we multiply that? What method? What's that name called? FOIL. FOIL. Very good. That's the F, the O, the I, and the L, the FOIL. First, outer, inner, last. First, outside, inside, last. So what's x times x? X squared. What's x times 2? 2x. Yep, we like the number first, but you're right. x2, 2x the same. What's 2 times x? 2x. And what's 2 times a 2? So when you clean it, what do you notice, by the way? If you look at that answer, if we just study it quickly there, it looks like we squared the first one. We took the first one here, we squared it. Right? That's where the x squared came from. If you look at the 4, it looks like we squared this. That's what Leonie wanted to do. She wanted to square this and square that. That will give you these two pieces. You're going to miss the middle piece. What is that middle piece? It looks like you multiply this times this. Isn't that what that is? But you have how many of them? 2 sets of them. So 2 sets of them. So the answer to this is x squared plus 4x, 2x plus 2x is 4 plus 4. So the rule I'm trying to bring to you here, if you want to do this one, a plus b squared. If you don't want to use this method, if you don't want to multiply them this way using the FOIL method, just looking at that answer, it says square the first one, multiply these two together. What's a times b? AB, but there'll be 2 sets of them. See that? There's 2 sets of them. Plus 2ab. And what's the last one? Square the last piece. B squared. That's the shortcut. Square the first, multiply the 2 pieces together, then multiply the answer by 2, and square the last one. Let's take a few examples on that. Try a few of them. X plus 7 squared. Again, in one step, square the first one. X squared. Multiply these two, that's 7x, then multiply it by 2. So this times this is 7x, multiply it by 2, which is what? Will be 14x, plus what? Square this one, 49. So it's x squared plus 14x plus the 49. When in doubt, again, if you forget all these rules, go back, use the FOIL method, and get your answer, and collect like terms. Let's try another one. We'll just stay with the shortcut here, see if we can memorize it before we leave today. P plus 10 squared. Square the first one, which is what? P squared. Multiply these two guys together. This will be 10p times the 2, that's 20p, yes? So whatever answer, when you multiply them, is 10p. 10 times 2 is 20. Plus square the 10, which is what? 100. All in one step. S plus t squared. Square the first. Multiply s times t. It'll be st with the 2 in the front. 2st, yes. And square the last one. T squared. Where this might be a little bit tricky, when you start dealing instead of one thing here, like let me give you this example. 2x plus 3y squared. This might be worth it to break it down like in 2 steps. Meaning what? Follow the rule. Square the first one. Let's just write it like this for now. Then we'll come back and find the answer to it. Square the first. Multiply these two guys together and then multiply the answer by 2. So this times the 2. And what's the last step? Square this one. Square the first. 2 times the product of this times that. And square the last. So now let's go through them. What is 2x when you square it? 4 what? Try again. 4x squared. Two times 3. 12xy. Can't combine them. And the last one is what? 3y when you square it. Try again. 9y squared. Try one more. 4p plus 5q, the whole thing squared. Again, we'll do it just like this. We'll take our time with it. Square the first plus 2 times the first times the second and square the second.
Okay, how are you getting like the 2, 4p?
I'll come back to that. Now square this one, which is what? 16p squared plus 2 times 4, 8 times 5, 40pq plus square the second one, 25q squared. The question, I'm not sure where you're getting the 2 here and these guys. Again, if you have, I'll go on the next page. The rule I'm using, it says if you adding this addition, if you adding 2 things, we'll call them A and B, and you want to square it. Let's see what the FOIL method said. That says A plus B times A plus B. And if you FOIL it, what's that? A squared.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's what? AB. This is also AB. And this is what?
BB.
B squared, or BB, which is B squared. So It's the first one squared. There's two of these. So 2 times this times that. That's what this piece is. And the last one is what? This one squared.
Okay, I get it.
So basically in English, we'll do it one more time. If you have the first term plus the second term, you have two terms here, and you want to square them. This method is only when you have two of them. It says take the first term, whatever that first term is, square it, plus 2 times the first times the second, plus what? The second one squared. That's the rule we're going to use. The first squared, does it show us? Oh, there we go. It is the first squared plus 2 times the first times the second plus the second squared. I can write anything there. I can really give you anything there. I can say 3x squared, q squared p plus 5p q to the third. And I want to square it. Square the first one. Two times. The first times the second. And square the second one. So if I square the first one, what is 3 squared? 9. What's p to what power? 4. Q to what power? 2. Power to power, you always multiply. You remember from last class. Let's look at this. 2 times 3 times 5. That's 30. P to what power? 2. Yes, because there's a 1 here and a 1 here. Q to what power? Try again. 5. You add the power when you multiply. Square this one. 25. P to what power?
5.
P.
P?
Yeah, P to what power? There's P and Q. What's the rule for power to power?
Is that 3 over?
That's over the Q.
Oh, okay. On 2?
The P has a power of 1. So P to the power of 2. Q to the power of what? 6. 2 times 3. Power to power, you multiply. When you multiply, you add. And that'll be your answer. Okay, all the problems we did if the sign was a plus. What about if that sign is negative? That's another special case. The good news is going to be the same as this. If this sign is minus, this sign will be minus. Everything else stays the same. And we'll show you that. If you have a minus b squared, again, we'll derive the equation for that. It's a minus b, a minus b. What's a times a? A squared. What is a times a negative b? A negative ab, right? What's negative b times a? Negative ab. What's a negative b times a negative b? Positive b squared. So what do you have? A squared minus 2ab plus b squared. The same as the other one, with the exception this sign is negative when this is negative. This sign is positive when that one is positive. That's the only difference. So again, if you have a first term minus a second and you want to square it, it is the first squared minus 2 times the first times the second plus the second one squared. So that's my rule I'm using here. Let's take some examples and go through them and see what we have. Let's begin with u minus v, and you want to square it. U is the first, v is the second. Square the first. Minus 2 times the first times the second. What's the first? U. What's the second? V. Plus the second one squared. What's the second? First one squared minus 2 times the first times the second. So this U is the first, V is the second. The minus sign is the minus sign. If I have 5x minus 2 squared, square the first. 5x, we'll just do them in 2 steps, minus 2 times. What's the first? 5x, and what's the second? Plus 2. That's the minus sign. Plus, square the second one. 2 squared. So what's my answer? 25x squared minus, what do we have here? 20x plus what? 4. I'll go to the next page. If I have 3a minus 4b squared, again, square the first, minus 2 times the first times the second, and square the second. Square the first. What is 3a when you square it? 9 what? 9a squared. 2 times 3 times 4. Bless you. 24ab plus, square the second one, 16b squared. One more on this subject. Two x minus 9y, the whole thing squared. Square the first. Minus what? 2 times the first times the second plus square the second. So now, what is 2x when you square it? 4x squared. There's the minus sign. What is 2 times 2 times 9? 36, and there's an x and a y still there. Plus 9 times 9 is 81. Y to what power? Second. And I'll finish it with an ugly one. Doesn't really matter how simple or how ugly it is. The rule doesn't change. Square the first. Bless you. Minus 2 times the first times the second plus square the second. Square the first minus 2 times the first times the second and square the second. And now just going to do each one, then we're done with this subject. 3 squares what? 9. X to what power? 4. Y to what power? 2. Power to power, you multiply your exponent. 2 times 3 times 5. 30. X to what power? What do you do with the exponents when you multiply them? Add them. 2 and 3 is 5. Y to what power? 5. What's 5 squared? 25. X to what power? 6. Y to what power? 8. There's one more special case, so you saw 2 of them so far. The first one is this one. The second one was the minus 1. This one, oh, that's the first one. The second one was the minus, that's this one. And now you're going to see the last one, the third one, in this section. And this one says, what about if they're not the same? So this is what we saw so far. We saw the first one says a plus b squared, which really means a plus b times a plus b, right? That's what it means. And we know how to find the answer. You square the first plus 2 times the first times the second, and you square the second. That's the first one we looked at. The second special case we looked at is a minus b squared. That means a minus b times a minus b. And the answer to that is a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. That's what we looked at so far. Both cases, if you look at them, both cases, if you look at this, these two are identical. See, this one is the same as this, and this one is the same as this. So what happens when these two are different? What are you going to have for an answer when one of them is minus and the other one is plus? And that's the third case. So it's not this one, that's when they're both pluses. It's not this one, that's when they're both minuses. One is minus, one is plus. These two are identical. A and B are the same, but one is positive, one is negative. If we FOIL this one out, let's see what will happen. That's what? A squared plus what? AB. And what about this one? Minus AB minus B squared. What is our answer then? What's the story with AB minus AB?
0.
Cancel, so what's left? With the minus sign. So when you have a case like this, that's the answer is always going to be A squared minus B squared. And that's case number 3. If you have a first minus the second, and you want to multiply it by the first plus the second, they have to be identical. The result is always the first squared. It's always a minus the second one squared. So an example, we'll begin with this. R minus S over R plus S. The first thing I look for, are these two the same with the exception of the sign between them? Yes. They're almost identical with the exception, that sign's minus, this is plus. So the answer is going to be the first one, and you need to square it, minus the second one, and you need to square it. Take the first piece, which is the R, and square it. Take the second term, which is the S, and square it. X minus 10, X plus 10. Take the first one and square it. Take the second one and square it. So that's what? X squared minus what? 100.
That'd be positive 100.
Always a minus. Because minus times a positive is a minus, the last piece. That's the B squared. You're not squaring the negative 10, I think that's what you're thinking about. You're only squaring the 10. Y plus 5, Y minus 5. It doesn't matter, by the way, which one you write first, the plus or the minus. Intentionally, I reverse them here. So notice the same thing with the exception of the sign. Take the first one and square it, minus, take the second value and square it. The first one is what? It's going to be y squared. Here's the minus. What is 5 squared? 25. By the way, just heads up for Algebra 2 next semester. You're going to start by, we're going to give you this. We want you to work it backward, all these problems. We'll give you the answer, go back to this. That's called factoring. That's next semester. So let's try 3m plus 2n times 3m minus 2n. Take the first one. Take the first one and square it. It's always a minus. Take the second one and square it. So we're going to have what? 9m squared minus what? 4n squared. 3a squared minus 5 times 3a squared plus 5. Take the first one and square it, minus take the second one and square it. 9a to the fourth, good. Minus what? 25. Ten minus 7m squared times 10 plus 7m squared. Take the first one, square it, minus take the second one and square it. What's the first one? 100. And this will be what? 49m to the fourth. And that's all the special cases that we have to know. Even if they give you a fraction, if they said, you know, we got b plus 1/5, b minus 1/5. Doesn't matter. Take the first one and square it, minus take the second one and square it. So that'll give me what? B squared minus, what is 1/5 when you square it? What's a 1/5 when you square it? What's a 1/5 times a 1/5? You're multiplying 1/25. You're multiplying two fractions. The way you multiply 1/5 times 1/5. The top times the top, 1 times 1 is 1. The bottom times the bottom. So b squared minus 1/25.
Maybe a quarter.
Well, not a quarter. This is actually 0.2 times 0.2 is 0.04. 400th. 1/25. Okay. One more. Got my just thought of something else. Then we're done. What happens if you have a problem like this? Let's put some of the stuff we learned today into, well, mix and match here. How about if I have this one, negative 2x squared times 4x minus 3 times 4x plus 3. I said, what's the answer to that? When you're multiplying three things, it does not matter which two you multiply first. So why not multiply these two first? Because we know how to find the answer to that. There's the negative 2x squared times, let's find the answer to when you multiply these two. Now what method are we going to use? Notice, these are the same, except the sign. Square the first, minus square the second. So when you square the first, what are you going to have? What is 4x when you square it? 16x what? Squared minus, what's 3 squared? 9. So I decided to multiply the last two because we just finished covering that. Now you want to take that and multiply it by this. That's from last class. How do you multiply it? You grab this, multiply it by this one, and you multiply it by that one. What's negative 2x squared times 16x squared? Negative 32x to what power? Fourth, good. What's negative 2x squared times a negative 9? Positive, right? 18x squared. And that's my answer if you multiply all three. So when you're multiplying three things, you can multiply the last two first or multiply these two first. If you multiply these two first, you will not be able to use the shortcut. So if I decided to do this problem, come back here. If I decided to do this problem a bit differently, nothing wrong with it, but I can't use my shortcut. So if you decide, you know what, I'm not going to listen to Z, I'm going to multiply these guys first. I said, go ahead. Multiply them. What are you going to have? What's negative 2x squared times 4x? Negative 8x what?
Squared.
Try again. Third. Yep. There's a 1 here. Got to add the exponents. And what about this times that? What do you have?
6x.
Yep. And now you're going to take this, the whole thing, that's the answer, and you want to multiply it by 4x plus 3. I can't use the shortcut, so I got to go this way first. And what is that?
Negative 32.
X to what power?
Fourth.
Fourth. That one?
And then 24.
24x to the third.
24x.
Plus 24x to the third. 18x squared. Can you see it? Now what happens to these two? Cancels each other out. So what's left? 32x to the fourth plus 18x squared. Is that the same answer? When you're multiplying three things, we don't care which two you multiply first. So I'm going to see which one makes it easier on me. I know there's a shortcut to this. I know the answer to it. Boom, put it in, multiply by that. That's why I chose the first method. But I could have done it this way too.